All right. Welcome everybody to today's webinar on suicide prevention and awareness. Today is September 19th, 2024. My name is Michael Cisneros, and I'm a training coordinator with the California Transition Assistance Program, or CalTAP. Just a quick little overview of what today is going to look like. We'll be starting off with U.S. vets. So we have Robert Storr here to talk a little bit about suicide prevention and awareness, and the signs that you should look for when working with individuals that are at risk. After he is done presenting, we'll go into a little bit about what CalTAP's all about, talk a little bit about the local interagency network coordinators, and provide resources along the way that you could use and download for yourself. Just a little heads up, the chat is going to be disabled for this session. That's because we're going to be adding resources to the chat throughout the webinar that you can download yourself. So if you do have any questions for myself, for Kirk, or even for Robert Storr, we encourage you to use the questions and answers feature that is provided through Zoom. Put your answers there. We'll get to them either throughout the webinar, or we'll hold them for the questions and answers portion at the end of the webinar so that we can have something to go over. With that being said, we're going to go ahead or actually before we move on, I do want to let you know this webinar is being recorded also. We do post all of our webinars on our website. You can go to our archives page there at calvet.ca.gov, or you can simply check out our YouTube page. On our YouTube page, we do have all the webinars we've conducted over the past couple years. You can check this out, check this one out along with the other ones to find those resources or connections that you need for whatever you're going through at this time. So let's go ahead and move forward now. I'm going to bring in Robert Storr from US Vets, and he's going to talk to you a little bit today about how to work with individuals who are at risk and to bring awareness to suicide prevention. So go ahead, Robert, when you're ready.
Thank you, Michael, and thank all the folks at CalTAP and CalVet. Being this is Suicide Prevention Month, it's a really timely conversation. We just passed World Suicide Prevention Day on September 10th. We lose about 700,000 people worldwide to suicide. Unfortunately, it's still a major issue and one that we want to call out as a public health crisis. So thank you for being here and providing the opportunity. The current approach to suicide is called the public health approach, which means each time you listen or learn, hopefully you learn a little bit more about the necessity of talking about it as a public health issue, like any other health issue, like heart disease, diabetes, that we destigmatize it and that we encourage people to talk about it and to get into treatment. Fortunately, it's still relatively rare, but that doesn't mean we don't want to talk about it. 50% of us will know someone who died by suicide, and those numbers are too phenomenally large. So thank you for being here. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things today. The World Suicide Prevention Day theme was really about starting the conversation. Starting the conversation means our ability to connect with people. And if you still are struggling to talk about the idea of suicide with people because of the stigma or the fear, or if you're being embarrassed or bringing it up, then simply start a conversation about mental health. And the important thing, I've been a therapist for over 30 years. I've been the director of the Suicide Prevention Center here in Los Angeles and Orange County and the Ventura County area for a number of years before I came to US Vets. And I'm currently on the board president for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where we're doing our best to raise awareness, both in the veteran community and the community at large. So the important thing about a conversation is the idea that after 30 years as a therapist or as an individual in mental health, I know I don't have to have your answer, but I do have to know how to listen. And listening is much harder than we think about it, in the sense that it's difficult for us not to think about what we want to do to respond or what we want to do to help somebody to give them the answer. Listening is about clearing your head. Now, the thing about being a therapist, if I do an hour of therapy with someone, it's a long hour because I have to basically discipline myself to put out any thoughts of what I think or want to do or what I want for somebody or how I want to fix their problems, and basically give someone the room to talk and make sure that I'm repeating at some level what they're talking about so I can hear them. Next slide. By doing this, I'm going to be able to really start connecting to people. But before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about the history. For the veteran community and all of us, it's important to know, next slide, that it actually began here. Next point, that it began here in Los Angeles, and that by advancing the proportion or the meaning of the level of importance of suicide, we began to really understand it. Next slide. So the idea was, what and where did it begin? Next point. It really began with two veterans, well, actually three, but two that started the whole movement. Prior to the 50s, there was no such thing as prevention. When these two veterans, Norman Farborough and Edmund Scheinman, here in Los Angeles, went to work at the West LA VA, right here in the city area, they began to investigate why a disproportionate amount of active duty military and veterans were dying by suicide. So they asked the coroner to do a specific uh, study. And the study was important because it revealed something very, very important and one of the most important concepts that I want you to go away with today. They began to look at suicide notes and asked the coroner to mix in notes that the coroner had his staff make up. So they had authentic notes from people who died by suicide. And then they had another group of notes, suicide notes, that were made up by the research assistants. Those notes were mixed together and they wanted to see if they could tell the difference. Next point. And they were able to tell the difference very specifically because by investigating these notes, they found a very specific thing that differentiated the authentic, true notes from the artificially made up ones. And that concept was what we would learn to come to learn to call ambivalence. The idea that people who were dying by suicide, those notes talked about the struggle to stay alive, the desire to stay alive, and the struggle to deal with the pain, which was kind of really difficult to understand, comprehend, and deal with, and was also leading to potentially their imminent death. Next point. So the point was, if we could understand for the very first time that people who were dying by suicide didn't want to die. Previously, it was thought that if you're suicidal, you're going to die. There's nothing we can do. When they studied the notes, they found out that was entirely wrong. That if we could figure out how to help people remember that they wanted to stay alive, that they desired to stay alive, and help them deal with the pain, then we really could help them stay alive and prevent suicide. This was the very first time. So they found a way at this point. The next thing that happened was Marilyn Monroe died, and they were called upon to do what we call a psychological autopsy, basically to diagnose whether it was a suicide or homicide, to look at all the surrounding circumstances. What they ruled was it was a suicide. And when this information came out, because it was a case that was well known across the United States, what happened next was sort of baffling. People from all across the U.S. began to call into them in their little research center and talk about the fact that they had the same feelings. This was the very first time people actually talked to someone about those feelings. As a result, their wives became the first suicide prevention crisis intervention counselors, paraprofessionals, not licensed people, over the phone to help these people understand, and they began researching with people who were actively suicidal. Today, that Suicide Prevention Center, the second largest in the United States, taking over 100,000 calls a day, or rather a month, is actively probably the busiest, but also the most preventable way that we can stop people from dying by suicide. Because what we learned is 95% of the time, by listening to those people and connecting, paraprofessionals, not clinicians, we can de-escalate the crisis. We can help people that want to die change their mind, de-escalate the crisis, and help them get into treatment. So I'll talk a little bit about that more later. Next slide. So I want you to remember this one fact, and next point on it, ambivalence. If you're ambivalent, it means you're simultaneously having two thoughts. You want to do one thing or you want to do the other, and you're trying to decide. Same thing with people who are suicidal. They're simultaneously dealing with the desire to die, but also the desire to live. Or maybe we want to put it the other way. They're struggling to stay alive and deal with the desire to deal with the pain. And the pain he later named as psychic. That was Edmund Scheinman's call for this is one of the major causes of suicide, is somebody dealing in an immense amount of pain, and then additional circumstances pile up on top of that, and they can't figure out how to cope. Next point. So that began kind of the search to understand it. Now, before we go into, you can go ahead and fill these out, Michael. Before we go into really how we deal with that, we have to understand a certain concept. And I want to use the health issue of heart disease. If we look at suicide as a public health issue, I know that when I go to my doctor, being an older male with a little bit overweight, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and a hereditary history of heart disease in my family, those are called risk factors. That means my doctor has assessed that in his initial exam. But that also means that every time I go in to see him, they're going to check my blood pressure, they're going to draw my blood, check my cholesterol, and they're going to see, what my weight is and if I'm exercising, if I'm eating properly. Why? Because those are the protective factors that will keep me from potentially having a heart issue. Well, we need to look at the same thing for suicide. Not everybody needs to be assessed, but if you are a veteran, or if you are somebody who suffered trauma, or you're dealing with a mental health condition that you've had for a long time, and you're in a crisis, then we want to make sure we assess you for the potential risk for suicide. So the reason we study veterans are they are disproportionately represented in the suicide statistics we have, with almost 13% of them dying by suicide when they only make up 7% of the population. That last point about firearms is very, very important. Is if we're going to look at prevention, we need to understand that the reason so many veterans and men as well, who die 4 times more often than women, are using lethal methods. And by using lethal methods, most often it's a firearm, and therefore they're not surviving their attempt. Women actually attempt 4 times more often than men because most women don't use guns unless it's a woman that's a veteran as well. The reality is they will often survive the attempt and we'll be able to get them in help. So we need to understand that firearms need to be handled in a certain way to help people become safe. And when we do a conference later in November for veterans specifically, I'll have a specific expert talk about how we're working to not take away guns and firearms, but help veterans handle them differently if there's a crisis or a way to interrupt a crisis. Next point, next slide. So as we go through this, and next slide, we want to find out, again, we know what makes a person higher at risk for a heart issue, right? The reality is there's health issues that we want to assess. Well, how do we do the same thing for suicide? Well, what we know is we want to make sure we don't underestimate the causal factors for suicide. It's not one thing. It's not I go through a breakup or I have a financial crisis or I lost a job, or I enter into a difficult situation at work and I'm under stress. It's a number of issues that work together. It's a complex interaction of what I call those risk factors and the protective factors to offset it. Risk factors increase the likelihood. Let's go back to the heart disease issue. If I have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, I'm overweight, not exercising, and I have a history, then my risk factor is elevated. If I diet, exercise, if I get my cholesterol under control, take medication for my heart, my high blood pressure, then the reality is I'm going to lower the risk factors, right, and reduce the likelihood. Well, let's take a look at how we can do that with the veteran community as well, or anybody at risk for suicide. Next slide. So we're going to look about preventing suicide by maximizing protective factors while minimizing risk factors. Next slide. And I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because this is a very short presentation, but I'll give you my information at the end if you would like a training. We do trainings for free. We do trainings for our Outside the Wire program, which is our mental health program on community college campuses, both in Orange County and in Los Angeles. We feel very privileged to have this program supported by Calvet, and we privately fund it to make sure we have counselors as well as interns stationed, positioned in the veteran resource centers at these community college campuses. So we mitigate the issue of access. I don't know about the rest of you, but when I'm on mental health, if I call somebody on the line and they say it's 2 months off, or if I have to go through a step or two, then, I have trouble getting my haircut if I'm put off, much less mental health. So we wanted to mitigate that issue by putting the therapist right in the veteran resource centers so people can stop in any time, they can see them, they can get help. And it's been very, very successful. We've had individuals tell us it has saved their lives. And as part of our obligation, we want to make sure we pass this information along to everybody. So you heard me a minute ago talk about the risk factors. I'll go through these very quickly. I think they're fairly self-explanatory. Suicide is a result of an untreated mental health program. Suicide is not a diagnosis. It's not someone you're suicide. You're depressed. You're anxious. You suffer from bipolar. You suffer from schizoaffective disorder. Various classifications of mental health conditions that can be treated if diagnosed and the person gets into treatment. What is the reason most people that are feeling suicidal or thinking about suicide don't get into treatment? Stigma. If you're taught in the military or as a veteran, you're carrying forward this, or even just as a man or a woman, that you should take care of your own issues, that you're weak or somehow you're bad or less than. If you have a mental health condition, that would be like telling me because of the history of heart disease in my family, I'm not a good person. I'm not a person that's healthy. My mother lived to 91. So the good news is treatable issues are there for all of us. So you'll see on mental health disorder, if you get access to care, that's the protective factor. 50% or more of the people who die by suicide, there's a substance found. So if you're someone who's struggling with substance, by the way, this information is not only for you or the veterans you serve or you as a veteran, but it's also for your family members. One of the caveats that I mentioned or have mentioned in the past is I was administrator of a mental health program for a hospital, and a mental health professional from a suicide prevention center came to train my clinicians, nurses, and case managers. Because I wasn't doing direct service, I said, I don't need to pay attention to that. I'll go back and do my paperwork, only to lose someone 6 months later to suicide in what I later would sort of reveal to be a classic case of risk factors that had gone into a crisis situation. Not to say that I could ever serve that person, save that person, and I don't want you to feel the burden if you have lost someone to suicide that you could. You know what you know, you can do what you can do. We can't save their lives, but we potentially can prevent a suicide by understanding these. Back to the other issues, trauma and combat experience, leaving the military, sometimes military experience without combat. I've worked with veterans who haven't necessarily been in combat, but also been in very stressful positions. And you've got to figure active duty military are trained to be on alert, to always look out for danger or trouble, or potential threats. Therefore, they're going to heighten their nervous system, which potentially long term could create some stress. Not always. The great majority of people have a different sense of, a system that can withstand that. Certain people don't, and it's biological interplay that some of us have, similar to what I have with I look at heart disease or heart issues. Some people will have it, some people won't. It doesn't differentiate character or anything else about that person other than a physical mental health condition. Military transition, the very purpose of U.S. vets is to work with all military that as active duty people transition to veteran status, we're there to provide them with support. I mean, an individual leaving a place where they had employment, they were told what to do, how to do it, given the skills to do it and the training, had housing, had income, had purpose, had a support group, all of a sudden leave into a world that non-veterans, civilians, have inhabited for years and sort of adapted, and they have to suddenly drop into this world and figure it out. That's where we come in. That's where CalVet comes in, CalTAP. All of the agencies, organizations, Department of Military and Veterans Affairs here in Los Angeles, other cities, the mental health resources we provide to assist someone. Transition for all of us is stressful. The reality is transition on top of the stress associated with where you previously were can be very, very difficult. So helping people cope, find jobs, get housing, provide mental health support, and provide resources, case management, and direction. Veteran Peer Access here in LA to provide veterans, and the one we do in Orange County, to provide veterans to work with other veterans who know what it's like to go through that transition. Access to firearms, again, I mentioned, if you have access to a means that's lethal and you're in a crisis, that can be dangerous. Now, it doesn't mean everybody that has a firearm or knows how to use it is in danger of suicide, but the majority of men die by suicide, 60% by firearms, veterans 70%. So it means we need to pay attention to how we're storing them, how we're treating them when we are in a crisis. And there is a law in California where you can actually give your firearm away to somebody who's got a permit if you are in crisis, and they can hold it for you while you're in that crisis so you don't have access. But we'll teach you more about that in our November conference. Social isolation is a big one these days, between all of the technology available. If you live here somewhere in Southern California, you're often isolated, you're in cars, you're moving between things, and you're not connected a lot of times. And if you're men and some women, sometimes you socially isolate just because you don't feel like it's okay to reach out. And then lastly, one of the major risk factors, economic stress and relationship issues. You see all the protective factors on the side, giving someone support, access to mental health care, crisis intervention resources, the crisis line, which I'll talk about later, 988, military and veteran services, the services we provide along with the other agencies I've mentioned, engagement in meaningful activities, purpose, positive coping strategies. How do you deal with mental health conditions? How do you deal with issues of stress? How do you calm your mind down? How do you become mindful and focus on things that can change your thinking and help you relax and reduce anxiety? Hope and future planning. Hope is a big one. If I lose hope, And often people under stress, their mind focuses on the issue and not the possibilities, and hope sometimes fades. And that can be a desperate situation. If we can remind them, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, we can often help them save their lives. Education and training, which is what we're doing today. All of you who have this information, pay attention to the people around you. Mention to them you've been through a conference like this. Mention if they or any of their friends ever feel suicidal or have thought about it or dealing with mental health conditions, that you're a little better equipped to deal with it. You don't have to have the answer. You don't have to be responsible to save their lives, but you can start the conversation, which again is the theme of World Suicide Prevention Day. Integrated care models, putting our physical, we're getting better about this, our physical health care together with our mental health care. So physicians are now asking about the same risk factors associated with mental health so you can get the proper treatment. Next slide. Just have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to move on to the next couple of things, and then I'll be finished up. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to let us know at the end. I'm going to switch slightly from risk factors to warning signs. And I've talked about the risk factors associated with heart disease because it's sort of the easy model I can use. That difference between warning signs and risk factors. Warning signs are indications that something is about to happen. You see them on the roadways, right? You slow down for a curve, or you see men working, people working on the freeways or the highways, and you pay attention to that. Same thing here. If I were to walk into my doctor saying I have pain or my feeling like I'm perspiring, I'm short of breath. If you ever want to get into the emergency room really fast, get those symptoms because those are imminent symptoms of a potential heart issue, and they will pay attention and get you help right away. But what if we knew how to do the same thing for people who are struggling? So people who have suicidal thoughts and been through trauma normally are coping really well, but all of a sudden they enter a crisis. If they enter a crisis and you know they have a history of suicide, then you want to pay attention. If they indicate they're feeling hopeless, if people tell you I'm thinking about death or it's not worth living, if there are changes in their mood suddenly, anxiety, rage, anger, they engage in more risky behavior, increasing use of alcohol or drugs, and sometimes just withdrawing. I know that if I have particular issues or problems I'm trying to work out, I don't call my friends. I want to pull back and see if I can figure them out. Not necessarily a good sign, but if I were suicidal, that would be when I would want my friends to reach out and say, "Hey, you doing okay?" Well, not to say necessarily they're thinking about killing yourself, but they might start talking about how I'm okay. Next slide. So we don't have to really look at everybody. Go ahead and see if we can hit the next slide. But we do want to look at evaluating. The reason most people don't ask about suicide, including therapists, is because they don't know what to do with the answer. You know, if I asked you today, are you feeling suicidal? And you said yes, what would I do? Would I call 911? Would I rush you to the hospital? Would I call in another colleague to help you out? Well, let me give you just four kind of indications on how you can determine what to do next. Obviously, if someone were suicidal in the moment, actively telling you they want to die, they had a weapon or pills, or were in a dangerous situation, that's not the time to intercede. That's the time to let professionals, police, or someone else intercede. But before that, as we're talking about it, if you were able to mention suicide and ask if someone was thinking about it or, really wanted to do it, if you ask a lot of veterans, of course, most of them have thought about it because if you've been under stress and you've been under trauma and you've had somebody that you've lost to suicide, now it enters your mind. Doesn't mean you're ever going to do anything, but it is a part of some of your thinking. I'm a suicide loss survivor. Having lost someone, I now know that suicide is something that will enter my mind. I do not want to die by suicide, but sometimes it's like when you're standing at a tall building and looking over the rail, I think I'm going to jump. You're actually checking to make sure you're safe. So sometimes you may think about suicide, not necessarily dangerous, even if you want it about, but it is something you want to talk about. Now, if you move into capability, if you start to tell me you've been thinking about it and thinking about how you would do it, that means you've gone beyond just the thought and the desire to actually planning it. And if you're starting to dwell on plan, again, that's orange. It's not red yet, but it does mean I'm going to make sure if I see you as a therapist every time I see you, and I do some private practice at time to time, and if I know people have told me they've had a history of thinking about suicide or previous attempt, guess what? The minute they're in crisis or they're having a difficult time, I'll check in with them to say, "Hey, are you thinking about suicide? What's your suicidal ideation like?" I won't even ask them if they're thinking about it. I will assume they are and make it easier for them to tell me about it. Now, if you move from capability to intent, which is mean if I were to ask you, you've told me you've just been thinking about doing it. If I ask you on a scale of 1 to 5, one being I'm really just thinking about it, to 5 being I don't know if I can keep myself safe. I'm thinking about it so much and I've got my means here and I'm afraid I can't be safe and I'm a 4 or a 5. Then if you're 4 or 5, I need to seek help right away. Now, I will tell you again, the Suicide Prevention Center, which takes over 100,000 calls a month, even at a 4 or 5, they can de-escalate it. I don't expect you to know that. I don't expect even I will do that most of the time, but I can. But I would make sure I got them connected to the crisis line. You can call 988 with them. You can help them call 988. You can alert 988. You can do any number of things. 988 now, the new suicide prevention line, is not only for people struggling with suicide, it's for those of us concerned about people that are struggling with suicide. And that I find really, really wonderful, that if I don't know what to do, if I do suspect something's off, if I'm not sure, if I need to find a resource, I can call that number and find resources and help 24/7. And if I call 988 and press 1, I will get to the Veteran Crisis Line. 988 will deliver you to the crisis line here in California. 988 plus 1 will get you the Veteran Crisis Line. You can talk to either. Some veterans don't want to talk to the Veteran Crisis Line, so they'll just dial 988. Some prefer the advantage of 988, pressing 1, getting to the Veteran Crisis Lines that can connect you to resources for the veterans. The last thing we see after desire, capability, intent is buffers. What can I do to help a person stay alive, which we talked about earlier, getting someone into mental health, connecting them to resources, making sure that we remove lethal means, doing other things. And I will tell you the last thing as I get ready to wrap up. Next slide. This is one of the ways we do it. We have our US Vets Veteran Peer Outreach Program in Orange County. And this I hope we can spread across. I think we have the Veteran Peer Access network here in LA. I'm hoping other areas follow. The biggest movement is we don't have enough mental health professionals, and paraprofessionals can often do just as well, if not better. Crisis Line is run by paraprofessionals, not licensed individuals, because they've been trained after 10 weeks how to ask those questions and how to de-escalate. So this, we work in Orange County along with groups that represent the Asian Pacific Islander, Latino, African American, and the LGBTQIA plus communities. Orange County has been really smart about putting together sort of a safety network of organizations that can really help put the word out about suicide. We do it through education, outreach, case management, training. We train people like I'm doing today for free. We educate people about it. We keep the conversation going. We provide case management and resources to connect people to the preventative buffers that I've talked about earlier. Last slide here, you guys. I'm going to wrap up with how do we do that as an individual. Um, if you were to talk to a person who is suicidal, again, you might not go as far as to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? You might say, are you struggling with mental health? I'm really concerned because you seem really down, depressed. I've heard you talk about not wanting to be around. You can introduce it any way you become comfortable. It's difficult to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? That obviously is the most potent. Not are you thinking of harming yourself? Have you actually thought about suicide? Um, the difficulty obviously is remaining calm. The more often you talk about mental health and destigmatize suicide, the more comfortable you will become talking about it. And again, don't just look at the veterans in the community, look at your family members, look at your friends, look at people around you, and let them know you're one of the individuals they could talk about. If you can do the most important thing, which is listen, next point, if you can actually take the time to ask them, what's going on? Tell me about it. Now, here's the key to this particular point. Um, when I do therapy, oftentimes I'll begin every session with, tell me what's going on. I don't want to just say, how are you? Because I'll often get fine, but tell me what's going on. And then I might get, oh, not that much, or I'm okay. And then I will say, will you expand upon that and tell me what that means? Because what you're doing is you're opening up the opportunity for someone to share based on the fact that you're willing to listen. And then you have to really learn to be quiet, and you have to be comfortable listening to people's uncomfortability. You have to listen to why somebody feels so desperate they may want to take their life. You have to listen to why life has been so hard. Now, it'll be easier to do that if you know that you don't have to come up with their answer. And in fact, if you can discipline yourself to not providing anything more than, yeah, I'm hearing you. Oh my gosh, that must be difficult. Oh, I'm really appreciative of you talking about this. if you can keep the conversation open, they will tell you the basic of psychology, good counseling support is giving someone the opportunity to find their answer rather than plugging it in. I don't know what you've been through for the last 30, 40, 50 years. I don't know the things you've tried that work that don't work. And I would be really egotistical to think that I do know what's best for you because I haven't lived in your head and your circumstances. None of us have. So have the respect to listen. Now, it doesn't mean I might not provide you an answer or a suggestion actually at the end, but I'm not going to lead with that. I'm going to listen. So we do what? We build rapport, we do connection. What does listening do? It tells me I get you. I hear what you're saying, I hear the struggle. If you can do that, it's a minor miracle because most of us don't take the time to listen. And you will hear information, you will hear the reasons the person struggled, but guess what will happen as well? You'll also hear why they're not wanting to kill themselves. Remember that aspect of ambivalence? Here's where it comes into play. If I can listen long enough for you to tell me the reasons you're so miserable, what happens when you cry really intensely? It stops after a while and you feel better. And then you can talk about something else. But if I stop you from crying, I stop you from sharing your pain or your struggle, I've stopped you completely because I've told you I'm not going to listen to you. I don't care, or I'm not able to. So by listening and creating the space for somebody, you will hear what the reasons are they want to die, but you also hear the reasons they're still here. And that's the buffers you're looking for. Next point. The last point to kind of bring you around to the half hour conclusion. You will hear what they've tried, what they haven't tried. You will hear that they're in financial struggle and maybe they're feeling desperate and that they don't want to be here. But you may also hear that they've got a parent or a sibling or a friend who could lend them the money or who could be there, or they could call a support system, Debtors Anonymous, or they could learn from the credit card to negotiate. There's, I like to tell people there are hundreds of options around us every day, all the time, but we all have very, very limited frames of reference. And often we focus on what we know, not on what we don't know. And we, under stress, focus on the problem and not the solution. So by listening and hearing possibilities, you can remind them, oh, well, you are here. And I hear you did have a brother that you've talked to about this before. Is that something you want to do again? I hear that you have been able to call a credit card company using a financial crisis and that you've alleviated the calls, or you consulted an attorney about the possibility of bankruptcy. Doesn't mean you're ever going to do it, but you have a possibility out there. I often use this example. If I were stuck in an elevator and the power went out and it was total pitch black, I might be a little panicked because I can be a little claustrophobic. If that elevator had a crack in the door and I could see at least the light and maybe where the elevator was, maybe between floors or whatever, I would relax a little more because I would see a possibility that there's a way out. Most of the time, that's all we need to do to relieve the stress or anxiety. And often, when we can't remember under stress, it's difficult for us to do that. The last thing you do with somebody after they've shared that, if people are in crisis or they're trying to tell you or they're pouring your heart out, oftentimes you're not going to remember all of the things they're saying. So if you're paying attention, you can remind them at the end of a conversation. Now, you don't have to do any of this, but this is actually from the training we do on the crisis line. This is actually the crisis line model that we teach paraprofessionals to do. If you can do any part of that, whether it's mental health and getting someone to talk about their problems or their issues or something they're going through, and you listen, you've done a person a great service, even if you've not been able to do the rest. But if you were able to hear some of the resources, you'd be able to tell them. Now, you see in the bottom corner, there's a logo for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. The other corner is US Vets, last slide. So I do want you to know, as I get ready to wrap up, you can listen to the reasons for someone who wants to take their life or is in stress, and you can remind them and help them problem solve, stay connected, get them into treatment, remind them what they've done in the past to get through an issue. One of my brothers once said many, many years ago when I was in a particular tough spot and I was talking to him and I asked him about it. And he said, hey, you know what? We've seen you, I have four brothers. We've seen you get through much harder times. You came to California, you got your degree, you started your practice. You pretty much have done all of this on your own. We sort of know you're capable of doing that. that one conversation that brother of mine reminded me still sticks with me today. So when I get into a tough spot, I remember what I've been through and what I've done to get through, reminding someone of their own resilience and capability. And trust me, anybody that's been in the service and is on the other side has been through a whole lot and has a whole bunch of skills that they may have forgotten in the moment. The last thing is crisis intervention, de-escalation. That model I just showed you, or calling the Suicide Prevention Center to make sure you connect somebody if you can't. Now it's 988 versus 911. 911 if it's an emergency and that person is in dire need of an intervention that you can't provide. They have a weapon or they have a means or they're in a crisis. 988, the suicide prevention line, 988 plus one. If you want to get them on the line, get someone on the line to help de-escalate or give you information. Last line. So I just want to take a moment to really thank you all for being here, for doing your part in Suicide Prevention Month to raise your awareness. If nothing more, you know a lot more than a lot of people. Be courageous to talk to people about their mental health, and maybe that will lead you to the opportunity to share with them. All right. And there's a crisis line at the bat. Thank Michael, and thank
Yeah.
you all for listening.
All right, Robert. Well, thank you for being here today and working with us on this tough subject. It is a heavy one, but the information that you provided is perfect for anybody listening, not just for veterans. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. Actually, before we move forward, I want to just bring in Kirk real quick, just in case there were any questions that came through while Robert was speaking. Maybe we could get to those right now, if that's what's going on. If not, we could definitely wait until the end. Keep
Yeah,
going.
we have no questions, but the Q&A tab is open. So if you have any questions, just drop them in there. Robert's going to be hanging out for a little while, and we can address any Q&A questions if you have them, and then we'll go over them at the end.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Kirk. All right. We'll go into a little bit what CalTAP's all about. I mentioned earlier, my name is Michael Cisneros. I'm a training coordinator with the California Transition Assistance Program. So what is CalTAP? Or where do we fall, I guess? So we are part of the California Department of Veteran Affairs. If you think about the veteran service organizations across the state and across the U.S., you have the USDVA, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, and then you have the California Department of Veteran Affairs. So we are a program that is administered through CalVet. We're talking about our benefits and services. You pretty much get those started at the county level. So we'll talk about the county veteran service offices coming up. And then you have your service providers that work throughout the state that provide access to services, connections, and benefits at their own level. So if you want to know more information about what CalTAP's all about, you can definitely visit our website. We do have a tool on that website that you can use to find your closest county veteran service office. You can find a PDF copy of your resource book, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about coming up. And then you can also find information about CalTAP, basically what it is, and find information about the modules and our pathways. This website is calvet.ca.gov. So this is what your Veterans Resource Book will look like. If you go to your county veteran service office or your Veterans Resource Center on campus, or even our website, you can find a PDF copy of this book, or you can find a hard copy at any one of those other locations. I'd like to say that this book is like gold for veterans. So basically everything that we discussed today when it comes to your benefits and even some services, you can find in this book. That's going to talk to you about what the benefit's all about. It will talk to you about eligibility requirements. It's going to talk to you about, what forms you need to submit and where you need to submit them. So definitely take a chance to look through the book, maybe download it onto your phone, keep it around, and look through it whenever you're interested to know what's out there for you. So what is CalTAP? What is the program that I work for, the California Transition Assistance Program? Well, we are a program that's designed to inform and connect veterans of all eras to their earned state and federal benefits, as well as provide continuous assistance and support as their needs change over time. And so what we've done is we've developed different pathways that help our veterans and family members navigate those benefits and services. We have a pathway that focuses on entrepreneurship, a pathway that focuses on employment, education, and then we have a core curriculum pathway that talks about those benefits and services that don't fit into the topics that I just mentioned. We do have a service writer pathway that we've started, paying more attention to. Basically, if you know anybody within the community or you have family members that want to work with veterans, you can send them to our website to view this pathway. It's basically just going to talk about military culture and what to expect when you are working with this population. So how do you use this website, or how do you use our web page, I guess? So if you go to calvet.ca.gov and you click on that CalTAP banner in the middle of the page, you're going to be taken to your pathways page that looks like this. Clicking on any one of these pathways will take you to a modules page that breaks down information just into more digestible pieces. Here on this page, if you notice down at the bottom, underneath the webinars section, there's an archives link. I mentioned earlier that we are recording this webinar, and we've recorded all of our past webinars as well. You can check out that archive link to see those webinars, the webinar recordings. In some instances, I do believe we are posting the slides as well. But if you're checking out a webinar and you want to reach out to us because you want a copy of the slide deck, you can always do that too. There's nothing against collecting your resources and making sure that you have phone numbers and the stuff that they provide through those webinars. So clicking on any one of those pathways is going to take you to a modules page. If you click on the core curriculum pathway and you click on module 5, you're going to see information about your California benefits. This module is also going to provide information of the VA healthcare system, claims and compensation. There's also one down there about financial literacy, if that's what you're interested in. So what are your California benefits? The first one and the main one we get the most questions on is going to be your college tuition fee waiver for your veteran dependents. This is pretty much the only education benefit that CalVet has to offer, and it is for veteran dependents. So it's going to basically waive your tuition and fees for any state-funded school, any UC, CSU, or California Community College. There are 4 different plans for this benefit. Most veterans are falling underneath Plan B, which basically requires a veteran to have a disability rating between 0 and 100, and they'll also look at the child's income level. As long as the child's income level stays below the state poverty line and the veteran has that income, or I'm sorry, that disability rating, then you can go to any state-funded school for free, pretty much. There's also ways that make it easier to identify as a veteran now here in California. You can actually get the word veteran printed on your driver's license. That just makes it so that you're not carrying around any information, any sensitive information like that, what can be found on your DD Form 214. You can also participate in the Honoring Veterans License Plate Program, and there's also a fee waiver, a registration fee waiver for veterans that are 100% disabled. Proceeds for the Honoring Veterans License Plate Program all go towards veteran services here in California. And for the motor vehicle registration fee waiver, it does require a 100% disability rating, and your disability does have to affect your mobility. If you like to be outdoors, they offer a fishing and hunting license at a reduced cost, and a state park pass that's I'm sorry, it's the fishing and hunting license that is offered at a reduced cost, and the state park pass that's offered at no cost. Both of these do require a 50% disability rating as well. If you're interested in taking advantage of these benefits, you want to check out the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for the fishing and hunting license, and then also the California Department of Parks and Recs for your state park pass. All right, we do have property tax exemptions out there and business license tax and fee exemptions as well. These eligibility requirements do differ across the state. So if you're looking to get to find out more information about the property tax exemption, we definitely recommend you looking and contacting your local county tax assessor. They can tell you a little bit more about eligibility in your area to take advantage of this benefit. All right, so along with those business fees and tax exemptions, there's also a disabled veteran business enterprise program for our veterans that want to open up their own businesses. What this does is just makes it easier to sell to the state. So it basically allows you to compete for state and federal contract dollars. Some benefits of owning or at least owning a DVB business is that each state has a 3% solicitation goals for they're DVBE individuals or businesses. And 10 of those agencies have a DVBE first policy, including CalVet, which means that out of all contract dollars, 3% of those contract dollars need to go to businesses that are owned by veterans with disabilities. And out of all the agencies in the state, 10 of those are going to look at those businesses first to give their contract dollars to. On top of that, you're going to be your company or your business is going to be listed in Cal eProcure, which is just a database for all businesses that states can look at, or the state of California can look at. And then you get to participate in reciprocity programs, which just has to do with permits and permits working here versus in Southern California, or Northern California versus Southern California. Okay, keep going. We do have a home loans program that's different than the federal VA home loans program. So our CalVet home loans program provides financing for veterans. It just makes it easier for veterans to get into homes. It's competitive market interest rate, or offers competitive market interest rates, requires low or no down payments, and the veteran does have to be a California resident and must reside in that home. If you are in the market for a home right now, we definitely recommend reaching out to our home loans division. I'm going to have Kirk put information into the chat for that division, along with a counterpart that we work with on these webinars as well. His name is Brad Pedersen. He's a great person to ask questions about the home loans program, including the VA home loans program, if that's what you're interested into. But definitely recommend reaching out to him. Great person to talk to about this information, and can definitely hook you up with connections if needed. All right, and so for our women veterans, we have a division that provides information, advocacy, outreach, and support. This division partners with the Veterans Leadership Council. It's there to provide outreach opportunities for our women veterans, and information for them so that they could continue thriving in the state. If you want to sign up for the women veterans roster, you can simply scan that QR code. That's going to put you on the mailing list so that you could be aware of what's going on with the division and what kind of outreach they are doing for the month. This is what their web page looks like. Feel free to check it out. Again, if you want to contact them directly, you could contact women veterans at calvet.ca.gov, or just be aware of what's going on by signing up for that roster. And the same thing for our minority veterans. We do have a division that focuses on minority and underrepresented veterans. Again, it provides information, advocacy, outreach, and support. And they also provide naturalization services for our veterans, or help with naturalization services for veterans. So again, if you are interested in what's going on with that division, or need to reach out to them for any reason, you can always scan that QR code to be a part of their roster and part of their mailing list. Or you can reach out to minority veterans at calvet.ca.gov. This is information about their webpage. Check it out if you are interested. Okay, coming down to the end of it, another thing that CalVet provides are homes for long-term care. So for our elderly veterans who are looking to get into a veteran home, there are 8 different homes across the state that provide different levels of care. So depending on what kind of care you're looking for is going to dictate what home you go to. So we do have independent living, intermediate nursing care, memory care, outpatient clinics, residential care, assisted living, and skilled nursing care. These are the locations of those homes. As I mentioned before, depending on what kind of care you're looking for is going to dictate which home you go into. But they are homes across the state, from Redding all the way down to Chula Vista. The requirements for those homes: at least 55 years age of old or older, honorably discharged, and a California resident. Must be able to live with other people in a community setting, communal setting. And there are priority spots for veterans like that are POWs or those that are economically disadvantaged or homeless. Cost to live there. residential care, domiciliary care, intermediate care, skilled nursing care. It's all going to require some kind of payment through your income. All right, may you visit the homes? Yes, you could visit those homes. These are the contact information for each home, depending on which one you are trying to get into. Feel free to take a picture of this slide to keep those numbers, or simply just write down the number that you're interested in. And again, these slides, this webinar is going to be recorded, or is recorded. It is going to be posted. So if you want to check back for this information later, you definitely can, or you can simply reach out to me or Kirk, and we can send you a copy of these slides as well. All right, so our cemeteries, along with our veteran homes, we do have Calvet cemeteries too. These are different than the federal VA cemeteries. Right now, there are 3 different cemeteries here in the state. There's the Central Coast Cemetery, which is located in Seaside, California. The Northern California Veterans Cemetery, which is in Redding. And then you have the Yountville Veterans Home Cemetery, which is part of the Yountville Veterans Home. They're in Napa, California. You do have to be a resident of this home to be buried in this cemetery. However, the other 2 are available if that's something that works out for you and your family. The 4th cemetery is in the works right now. I'm not 100% sure how far along they are with it, but you can be expecting a Southern California Veterans Cemetery soon. I believe it's going to be in Orange County. So just be on the lookout for that too. These are the national cemeteries as well. So on top of the Calvet cemeteries, you do have your national USDVA cemeteries. Bakersfield has one, Miramar, Riverside, Sacramento here in Dixon, and then San Joaquin National Cemetery. These are the burial benefits that are available to you through the state and also through the federal VA. If you are trying to take advantage of these, or you and your family or anybody in your family is trying to take advantage of these benefits, we definitely recommend reaching out to your county veteran service office, and they can get the process started for this part of the veteran's life cycle. All right, so if you do want to keep in contact with CalTAP, you want to know more about what we're doing, the different webinars that are coming up throughout the month, we encourage you to provide your non-DoD email address to the CalTAP inbox simply by emailing that CalTAP address. We'll put your email address into our mailing list. That way you get a weekly email that focuses on the different webinars and service providers that we'll be working with for that month. You can also register for My Calvet. Registering for My Calvet is basically just going to tailor the information from our website into or tailor to the stuff that you're interested in, or to the information you need to know. And you can find our social media pages. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and check out our YouTube page for these past recordings, and then attend any of these webinars. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I check my inbox daily. Definitely reach out through email or through phone. Leave a message if I do not answer. If I can't answer your questions, then I probably can direct you to somebody who can. So don't hesitate. With that, I'm going to go ahead now and pass it on to Kirk Eller. Kirk is going to talk to you a little bit about our local interagency network coordinators, or links for short. He's going to talk to you about how they work with veterans across the state. So go ahead, Kirk, when you're ready.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Robert. That was a great presentation, a lot of insight and resources available. So I am a training coordinator with CalTAP. I am not a local interagency network coordinator. However, I am going to fill in some of the roles and responsibilities of the link, or what they do for your region where you can be finding them. So I'm going to post a map. Next slide, Michael, please. This is the link map, and it gives you a region where you may be located as to who the contact is for your local interagency network coordinator to access benefits. So if you live in one of these regions, which is divided up by the national FEMA disaster relief map, you can see the counties that are involved in those maps up north are much more widespread than down south, except for the Inland Empire. So our links drive a lot. They cover a lot of ground and a lot of area, but they are the boots on the ground to provide you access to those resources in a variety of ways. And how they connect you is important. Next slide. They actually provide outreach and service members and veterans to their families and make direct referrals to service providers within their local regions. They also assist with local emergencies. They attend the local assistance centers and the emergency centers. Maybe there's a local fire or a flood and you get evacuated. They're there to provide assistance to veterans who may need assistance with their prescription drugs or possibly their access to documents or records. Their DD 214 was lost in a fire or a flood and they need access to it. Those kinds of things. That's exactly the kind of resources that they provide services to. They also provide leadership and advocacy to local communities. Hey, they tell their local communities, this is what we need to advocate for the veterans within that region and that community. Next slide. How they do it, they connect you to your benefits. They have contacts within the Employment Development Department, as well as the AJCCs or America's Job Center, with the local veteran employment representatives and the disabled veteran outreach specialists. They can connect you if you're out of work to those agencies and entities there to get the resources that you need and the benefits, as well as the County Veteran Service Office. They have a very good rapport with all of the county VSOs and with CalVet and the regional offices. They can provide you a warm handoff to that veteran service officer if you're looking to file a claim or need other assistance with filing another benefit application through the VA. And they can also assist you with the healthcare for VA healthcare or the medical centers in your region, as well as the vet center. Next slide. So that's how they stay connected. This is my contact information. If you do need information about your local link where you reside, please use that link map, or you can go on one of the links that I provided in the chat for regional outreach. Please contact the local one if you have any questions. They have an extensive network and know people locally where you reside. So that's why it's important that you stay connected with them for them to provide you the best services available. This is my email and my phone number here. If you have any questions going forward, I'll be more than happy to assist you in any way I can or connect you with the local link in your region.
Great. Yeah. And one thing about the links too, they also accept cold calls as well. So obviously
Absolutely.
within business hours, unless it's an emergency. But yeah, if you simply could just reach out to them if you need any assistance, and they should be answering their phones and working with you. All 8 of them, or I'm sorry, 7 of them right now are great people to work with. You're going to get the best help from them. And like Kirk said, they have connections outside of CalVet and of the USDVA. For any situation. So,
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna open up the floor again to all presenters and anybody who has questions. I do have contact information up right now. If this topic isn't something that you want to put up in the Q&A, we totally understand. Feel free to reach out to us with our email address or by phone if needed. Or you can simply dial the 988 number for help. But we're going to open it up and see if any questions have come through or not.
We had one question. It was related to the college fee waiver. They were asking if the disability compensation is considered as income. No, it is not. When you receive VA disability compensation, it is non-taxable. And the income for the dependent for the fee waiver is only for the dependent student, not for the veteran. So their income verification has to be their adjusted gross income solely for the student. It does say on the application any contribution from the veteran parent. And to keep it below that national or the federal or the state poverty level for California, you can kind of adjust what your contribution is to make sure you stay below that threshold. So if they have like Chapter 35 income from the VA, whatever they get paid monthly for that stipend, and then your contribution can adjust to keep it within that threshold.
Right. Yeah. That second part is mostly like an honor system.
Yes.
They're asking you how much do you provide your child for support. And you let them know, how much it is. They're not going to verify it. It's going to be based off of what you provide. And like Kirk said, they're just going to be looking at the child's income level. If the child didn't make any income throughout that year, they can go onto the IRS's website and they need to provide a letter of non-filing, which just shows that there's no income for that child. You're going to provide that letter that shows, if there is any support that you do provide. If not, then the child is going to have that benefit waiting for them.
And that's the only question we had. So Q&A is still open if anybody's has a question for Robert or either one of us.
Right. Well, I mean, we did make it to the end of the hour as well. So if the Q&A is still open, we're going to move on just for the next couple slides. Any questions that come through, Kirk, I'll have you flag them. This QR code right here is just going to take you to our landing page for any upcoming webinars. So if you want to scan that, see what we're going to be talking about next, it's going to take you to the links where you can register right there on the spot. If nothing has come through yet, I want to thank US Vets and Robert Storr for being here today to talk about this very important subject. And like Robert said, we'll be working with them again in November on another event that's going to be focusing on suicide prevention and awareness. I don't know, Robert, if you want to maybe have a couple words for that or.
Sure. I first of all want to thank you guys for your continued work. You've been champions of this work, which is very, very important, and always provided us the support to put this together. In November, we bring together some various experts and some local agencies in California to really present a unified approach to talking in more depth means restriction, the ability to really, or means safety rather than restriction, because it's been changed. The ability to support people at how to deal with that. A suicidal crisis is a relatively short event, and if you can keep the means safely stored or away from the person in crisis, you can often save a life. But we'll also have other presenters with lived experience and a lot more information and resources available. And we usually put it together every year around the first or second week in November, and we'll have information as soon as we get all that together. But thanks again. Your program's amazing, and I appreciate all the support.
All right, thank you. And we'll be most likely be advertising for that as well, if we're gonna be a part of it. So be on the lookout for that. Provide your non-DoD email address to that CalTAP inbox, and you can stay aware of what's going on with that event.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you again for everybody for being here. Contact information for CalTAP if you have any questions after the fact, or if you just simply need somebody to talk to, do not hesitate to reach out. And like I said, if we can't work with you, we can definitely get you connected to somebody who can. Again, thank you all for being here, and we will see you guys at the next one. Have a good one.